best kept secrets on UNO's campus because we have boats and we actually get out on the coast pretty regularly. And oftentimes with some of these projects, if we're sampling a lot, like the more hands, the better, right? And so we have opportunities for undergraduates to come with us into the field. You'll see in some of the labs, we have tons of waiters because we actually, get boots on the ground. This is one of our lab rooms. So this is where undergraduate researchers, graduate researchers, we have a postdoc for all in here. This is some of our instrumentation that we take out along the coast. We're dealing with dirt and coring devices and ovens for measuring biomass. So, we have a project looking at the root structures of mangroves. And then these are some cool sensors that we're building. We built these ourselves and they're relatively cheap, but they're looking at how often a spot gets inundated. So how often is it dry versus how often is it wet? And that inundation time is really informative to how that land is going to evolve over time. But yeah, you can see we have a lot of equipment, a lot of fun things for getting out into the field. Yeah, we try to get students out on boats as often as possible because it's a lot of fun. We have some undergraduates who can take particular opportunities. So the Tolmas Scholar Program is one that UNO has on campus. There are other opportunities. So I have a grant where we send a student to Caltech in the summer to do work on a collaborative research project that we have with them, looking at that sediment size in the Mississippi River. And so that student we had 2 students who went to Caltech to study that and then continued the research when they came back to UNO during the regular school semester. So at the undergraduate level, it really can vary whether or not you're acting as an independent researcher or you're volunteering for a field day or you're just volunteering to kind of generally help with lab tasks. That analyzing sediment grain size is kind of tedious, and so that's something but you can still get some practice working with those instruments. But then the master students and the PhD students, then that is your project, and so you're working on your thesis or your dissertation, and you really have ownership over those research questions. And the professors, your advisors, we're here to guide you. We're here to make sure you have funding for those projects. But the work itself is yours, and that's how you come out of here being a fully qualified independent researcher. And we're very proud of all of our graduates, and they've gone on to do fantastic things. Katrina obviously brought in a lot of storm surge, and so this is what we call a marsh ball. But if you look at it, it's just really amazing to see that this is what's going on below ground in all of our marshes. We calculated the uplift force that was required to rip this out, and it's essentially the same force as it would be to lift like 10 cinder blocks. Our professors actually, were some of the first people to kind of go in and assess after Katrina, and they collected these. And so one of the projects that I have going on right now is trying to understand. We have a lot of focus on land loss in Louisiana. However, we are trying to build land. And so we had students actually build projects out there to try to keep as much of that sediment close to shore so it can be used to build land, because that makes a really big difference in terms of how much land survives with the future rates of sea level rise. That sediment is so important. Right, when we're losing land, we need to retain as much of that as possible, and we want to retain it in a place where it's going to benefit people or benefit communities. And so the seniors in this department have been building these structures to try to do exactly that, of help the natural processes of that sediment deposition, so depositing and building up. How do we enhance that? And so they've been working on real structures that they actually go build on the coast in this one particular area called Quarantine Bay to really, help put the vision of the future of Louisiana, help turn that into action and actually the actual coast that we want going into the future. And so a big part of that is sediment management and making sure that sediment is not being lost to deep water, but is being retained close to shore where it does communities some good. And this, this wasn't UNO, but this map is really cool in terms of this is just looking at the land change from Katrina. And so you can see that this is Katrina's track, right? Not too long after that we had Rita, and so that's the track of Rita. Yeah. And again, those two hurricanes, they happened back to back because the Gulf stayed pretty warm. And so historically, when one hurricane passes, it mixes up the water so much that the overall water temperature decreases, and that prevents another hurricane from forming. But because the Gulf is now so warm kind of all summer long, and much deeper into the water column, even after it gets churned up, it's still pretty warm. And so we see many more back-to-back hurricanes than we used to. And we have another project looking at when vegetation or when plants start to grow on that, because that's a really big difference, right? Walking on a mud flat versus walking on something with plants growing out of it. And so we're trying to understand exactly the conditions that make it possible for those plants to start growing from the very beginning. All the models that we use for that, we want to make sure that they're as good as they can be. And so we're trying to collect the data to enhance the accuracy of our predictions so we can be, more certain in our planning. And so I think that I love that kind of science, right? That it's very immediately useful to practitioners who are really working to build the coast that we want. Every time, we present our work at conferences, and so sometimes you're giving an oral presentation, but sometimes you're giving a poster presentation. And so whenever a student gives a poster presentation, we encourage them to put it on the walls. And so this is actually a project I was. So we do a lot of work in Louisiana, but this one was actually in Virginia. And so, there's lots of coastal issues. Yeah, there's a lot going on in our department all the time. So we've been pretty good about bringing in grant money, which is also fantastic. So we have a lot of projects going on. UNO's Pontchartrain Institute of Environmental Sciences has been, leaders in the field of studying coastal Louisiana. And I feel like the barrier islands in Louisiana kind of get forgotten about a little bit. So some people don't necessarily think of New Orleans as a coastal city, but we're really not that far from the Gulf, right? And we're right on the Mississippi, and we receive, obviously we get a lot of hurricanes, and so that storm surge, we want to keep that as far away from, the city's protection system, our levee protection system as possible. This is the barrier islands that I was talking about that I feel like people kind of forget or neglect a lot of the time, but it's really fascinating if you take a moment to look at it. This is looking at 1887 to 1934, and so there's these different time periods, and then this is just between 2004 and 2005, but obviously we had Katrina in 2005. And so, a lot of focus within the department and kind of previous decades has been on those barrier islands, and the state has also pumped millions of dollars into rebuilding some of those islands. Those islands are really important for understanding how the upper estuary works, and how, tidal exchange, so how water flows in and out of it, which impacts seafood. And so we all love, Gulf seafood, right? We all want a fresh shrimp po' boy, and so all of these things are related. This is what those samples look like, and so we run them through our grain size analyzer to see what the distribution is of the different grain sizes. And so, it really matters whether or not he's talking about something really small and cohesive versus sandy. And that, taking these samples tells us a lot about what's going on in the barrier islands, and how things have been responding to, both environmental forcings, but also kind of other restoration projects that are going on in the area. But yeah, it's pretty cool that that's all happening here.